And it looks like everybody is already muted on their phones or on their computers, and that's just great. Please feel free to speak up whenever you want to, but it is great to leave yourself muted when you're not speaking so we don't hear background noise. And I do encourage you to participate, jump in with questions, voice, or you can use the chat window. Part of the GoToMeeting program here has a little chat window. And if you keep that open, you can type in questions. And Tanya is also on the line with us from PD Programming. And she will be able to read those and either forward them on to me or speak them or just respond to you directly. It just helps field things so I don't have to focus quite as much on the chat screen while I'm doing the training. All right. Let's see. I think one of the things I wanted to show here is if you need to reach us for stuff that is specific to your agency, that may be an issue that really doesn't apply to a lot of other people, and so you don't want to bring it up here, by all means contact us. If you just come down here on our pdmagic.com website. Oops, you can't see my screen. You can only see Notepad.
It shows your screen.
All right. That's excellent. This is a good way to get started. Okay, so now on my screen, you should see our homepage at pdmagic.com. And down at the lower left, there's a Contact Us link. And if you click on Contact Us, you'll see you have links to email each of the three people here who can answer questions for you, as well as a phone number. You can also use our general sales or support, or use your browser to send the email to us instead of using an email program. So those are for those people that have questions that really don't apply to everyone, that are specific to projects we may be working on for them. And we'll be happy to talk to you about that, maybe even run a live session with you as well. Tanya, you said 3 people would be online today?
I was wrong.
All righty. Good to see everybody out there. That's wonderful. So, quick show of hands. We don't have the ability to raise hands here. How many of you have 8 or 10 inches of snow like we do here? I know Tim asked and said he had a ½ inch. Boo-hoo. We're loaded with it here. I was actually out shoveling since 6:30 this morning until about a half hour ago. So that's in Lafayette, Colorado. Got all that snow. And I happen to love it. Don't know how Tanya feels about it. All right, what else have we got that we got to get set up here? Okay. All righty, so I want to show you the list of sessions that I leave behind here. I did not. So also on our home page, in the top right, and I'll be leaving this up probably indefinitely, we have our announcement for the mini trainings. And there's a link on there to the mini trainings information. This is a knowledge base article in our knowledge base. And down in the green section, you will see a list of all the trainings that have occurred, those trainings that are still coming up. We will be graying each of the trainings after each week after we've done that training. And you have a link here to join the meeting. And in addition, you have, we will be posting when we start recording, when we've got the recordings, the recording link over here as well next to each of those meetings once we've started posting the recordings. But this is a list just showing you at the beginning of each month on the Wednesday, we'll have a beginner training like these guys. And in those cases, we go through the very basics of the program, being very general about what we're showing. And then on the other day, on Thursday, which is the first Thursday of each month, we'll be covering a particular topic. So we did collision diagrams, we did some admin stuff, and today we'll be doing tabular lists, pretty much everything you can do with field lists. And this is a small subject. I'm not expecting it to really go the 2 hours, but we'll see. Questions certainly will help it extend that a little bit. And then, of course, after we're done with dealing with tabular listings and field listings, we can move on to what other questions people may have. So that's our listing. All right. Yesterday, or I should say each time that we do one of these sessions, we pick some agency's data to use. And yesterday we used Oregon DOT and we used the city of Peoria. And today I'm going to start with the city of Peoria. We may bop back and forth to Oregon as well. But I know there's a couple of features in the Arizona configuration that are unique that we haven't really published very much and can be handy that have to do with the field listings. And so I know I can find them in there so I don't have to figure them out as I go along. All right, so again, what we should be doing in most of these trainings is spending about an hour with lecture. Maybe today will be closer to half an hour, 45 minutes. Then we'll take questions related to the lecture, then any questions you've got. All right, before I get started, do we have any questions? Oh, we have some answers to my questions. See, I'm ignoring my chats over here. Let's see, 1 to 2 inches in Missouri. I'm sorry, that's NEMO. That to me would be Nebraska, Missouri. But that would not be Nebraska, Missouri. We have dry pavement, that would be up in Oregon. None in Phoenix. Good, Manar. Glad we don't have too much snow down there. All righty. I actually enjoy it a lot. I go out, I shovel, I volunteer shovel for the senior center, and it gives me an excuse to drive around in the snow before anybody else gets out there, which is kind of fun too. Safety notwithstanding. All right, let's get rolling since I don't hear any questions yet. So I'm going to log into Peoria's system, and we'll probably just pick up where we left off yesterday at the last training with what we've got on our screens. So because this is not a beginner training, I'm not going to go through all the steps, but I will go through some of the steps to sort of getting to where we're going to get started here. In order to be working with any field lists at all, you need to have created at least a study. So you need to have some data that you're working with. And so I'll just do that real quickly here. On the screen right now, what I'm looking at is a project, and the project is the main project, and that's the default. When you start the program, you'll be in the main project. And then on the left-hand side, we have a list of any studies you've already created. You may have nothing in this list, in which case you'll probably have nothing in any of these boxes as well. Or you may have a list like I have. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new study, and I'm going to do that for 75th Ave and Cactus Road, just like we've already got there. So I'm going to click on New Study. And all right, so this study has 16 crashes in it. That is probably a case ID. We'll see what type this was. Oh, this was an intersection. This is 91st and Cactus. But I'll just show you, as you're creating your study, each of you has different ways you may be creating studies. You may be using intersection, you may be using a case ID list, and that really is a topic either for individual discussion or for, like yesterday's beginner training, talking about the different ways of creating a study. So whichever way you create a study, the result will be you have a list of crash records that you have available to you to work with. I'm going to grab a little bit more data here. I think we have this data in there. And as I said, I was going to go for 75th and Cactus, so let's just change this to 75th Avenue and Cactus. And as you may recall, if I click on this button right here, it'll refresh the counts for how many crashes are in this query. So now I have 23 crashes to have a look at. And so that's appearing down here. That's my new study. And if I click down there, it'll update everything on the screen. My other option was just to create a report, and that would have updated the screen as well. So here's my 75th and Cactus. It was given a 1 because there's already a 75th and Cactus up there. Got my 23 crashes, tells me my date range that I'm working with, and it gives me a list of items, case IDs in the study. Did I have a question? No questions? Those of you who become regulars will get tired of me whining for someone to ask a question. But that's okay. We'll do that in about a half an hour. Alrighty. So from here, the simplest use of the field list and of a tabular listing is to simply create a listing report. And that's this icon right here where I get to select from available listings. Many of you have perhaps already got custom reports like this one. This is a particular listing called the PDLR Detailed that was created for the state of Arizona users. And in that case, if you clicked on one of those, you'd get a listing immediately. You wouldn't have any selections to make. But I'm going to choose this one, which will list for me all of the listing reports that I have available to me. And in this case, I have one called a case ID listing. And actually, because this is a listing training, I'm going to sort of hit each of these so people can see what happens when I do each of them. I'm going to choose case ID. This is one that ships with the program. So that is to say, it's actually in a shared repository that everyone has access to. So you can't change it. You can override it, but you can't change what's in the case ID list. This is something that we put out, and it just sort of guarantees that you've always got the ability to have a listing available to you. But for most purposes, this won't be sufficient for your needs. So you may want to create another one. I'm going to choose another one out of the list, so I'll just make another listing here. And I'll choose this PD Basic listing. Now this one again is a specific one for Arizona users. Each of you probably has at least one that we've created for you as a listing. And if we haven't, and if you'd like a listing, if you'd like some help creating a listing, by all means contact us after the training and we'd be happy to set you up with one. But most of you should have at least one listing in there that gets you some of your basic fields. So this is one, as you can see, has a bit more data in it. The listing will show you the title of the listing. It'll show you what the filter is at the top. And in this listing, we have a few interesting things. Let's see. So one of them is this number field, kind of interesting. This is actually an index of this crash record within the query. So we always sort our queries by case number. I don't even see a case number on here. There might be one. No case number. But we sort them by case number, and therefore this number will stay unique. It'll always be the number one for this particular crash. Let me actually add a case number to this right now. Oh, I'm sorry, this is their special one. Not going to do that. I'm going to modify this one. So I'm going to do here is PD Basic Field List. Oh, we've already got one with a copy. Isn't that nice? Let me just go in. I'm going to edit my field list, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment, but I want to get a case ID number in here for you first. Oh, is that incident ID down there? In Arizona, there it is, incident ID. Before I get into showing you how to edit it, I want to make sure I have a case ID showing up in our list for you. Okay, so this is a bit of a modified basic listing. So now I have an incident ID or their case ID number there, and a number. So what I was describing is every time we execute the query, a unique number gets assigned to every crash record. And because they're sorted the same every time, it'll always be the same number unless you change the data in the query. So if I change the date range, if I filter, anything like that, I'm sorry, not if I filter, excuse me. If I change the date range or if I change the criteria for the query, I will get a different number for a case number. Filtering won't do that. What's nice about this is you can, if you've used labels in the collision diagrams, and perhaps you use your case ID as a label or you use a date as a label, you can use this record number as a label. And now all your labels are tiny. So you just need the numbers 1 through however many are in the diagram showing up as a label. And so I'll make a diagram in a little bit and I'll show you how that works. But for right now, I'm going to look at the rest of the fields that are in here. So a couple of other things that have happened. Let's see if there's any other interesting fields in the list. All of these fields are looked up. All the ones that have lookups. And what that means is rather than seeing the number 4 or the number 6 for rear end, we're actually seeing the words rear end. So let me show you first of all how we edit the field list that's being used for this report. So every field list report, every listing report has a field list within it. It actually refers to a field list. So there's a whole bunch of field lists out there and you can pick from them. So when I click down here, this is where I get to select a list of fields for this report. So I'm going to click on that and you'll see these are not the same as the listings that I got up here. Listings are full report templates. They involve how they were sorted and a few other things. What this is just the list of fields. And so I've created this list of fields here. This is showing the fields that I've got. And I can add or remove fields from that list. So let's go do that. I'm going to click on Edit Field List. And I can do this because I've already made a copy in my personal account. That's why I've got this Edit Field List available to me. Those that are in the shared area, in many cases I will not have access to edit them. Now, as I am an admin in pretty much everybody's configuration, I actually do have edit for these two here. And those of you that are admins for your user group, if you've been designated as an admin and these are coming from your own user group, you'll have the ability to edit them as well. And those will affect anybody whose field list you edit. So you want to keep that in mind anytime you're playing, excuse me, with a shared resource. Anytime you ever pick anything out of shared, if you edit it, you affect anybody else who has used that shared resource. So if you want to play with it yourself, you want to make a copy. And the way I made that copy from this one, I had the basic field list up here, and I clicked on dupe. So if I have, for example, case ID, and I click on dupe, I get case ID copy. And this one I can go edit. You'll notice when I had this one, I wasn't allowed to edit that one. That's in our what's called master configuration fields, and so nobody can edit that. So case ID copy, I can immediately edit. I'm going to delete that, get that out of the way. So we're going to play with this copy that I made of the PD basic field list. And you'll notice that what's in here shows me all of the fields in that field list, and if they're not just a field, it'll show you in parentheses where the data is coming from, which field we're actually pulling the data from. So if I've renamed the column, in this case I've, let's see, well, I've renamed the row num. I've renamed row num to the pound sign. And so this shows you both row num and the pound sign. In the case of incident ID, it's just the field incident ID. Since I haven't renamed it, it won't show me anything in parentheses. This one here again is called date. We've grabbed it from the incident date field, and so it shows you that. So let's go edit them. So I click on edit. Forgive me for clearing my throat frequently. Looks like all that work this morning shoveling did me in. All right, this is the list of fields that you have in your field list. And in this particular report, the PD basic field list copy, these are the fields I've got. And the basic use of this screen is I scroll through my list of available fields. That's this green section. These are my available database fields, and I can put them into this list. So for right now, I'm going to put a couple at the bottom just so you can see how that happens. And by selecting something lower in the list, I could choose here, and it would put the next fields right underneath action. I'm going to choose injury severity, and so anything I stick in will go under injury severity. Let's pick a really basic one here. Do we have a weather in here yet? No, let's see if there's a weather field. Here's a weather field. So here's weather, and I'm going to insert weather, and I can insert multiple at a time, by the way, by highlighting more than one. We'll do that in a little while. You'll see me pick a whole bunch. But for right now, what I want to show you is weather, when I pick it, populates some fields over here. It populates the title, a description, and an expression. Now, if you change the expression, it has to become valid before it'll actually show data. So if I was to choose, for example, weather, and then I put in an X over here, or put an X in the middle of weather, that's not going to work. That simply won't show anything. It'll show an error when you go to do it because that's not a valid expression. Valid expressions are really anything that could fit in our filter. If you've used the filter before, and that'll be the subject for another training, but the filter has a syntax that allows you to combine fields, manipulate them. I can take the, I can concatenate fields, I can attach one field to another, I can put spaces, I can make them shorter, etc. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave these alone. This just lets me put weather in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab weather again, and I'm going to stick it in one more time. Populated exactly the same. Now I've got two weather columns in my query or in my listing. I'm going to click the advanced button for one of these. And you'll notice that what there is the ability to show it as a different data type. Well, this is just a numeric value, so showing it as text is fine. If we had images, this would be a place, and I'll show you how to do images. If you had images, this would be a place to cause images to show up and tell them how they were encoded. And if you have links that go outside the system, so if you, for example, have scanned reports on another system or on another drive in your network, you can cause it to create a link to thumbnails of those images or just links to the data that you want to link to. We can link to pretty much anything. You could link to PD Programming's website if you like. So this tells the display method. But here's an interesting one. Every field that has a numeric value or even a character value in the database that has a lookup for it can have a lookup table. And if you specify a lookup value here, it'll tell you the English version of weather. Snowy, lots of snowy, rain, wind, etc. If you don't specify a lookup, then you will not see a looked up value. You'll see the actual raw data internally. Now, for some of you, you never want to see that, right? You may not have any idea what is behind the data that you're looking at, and that may be the case if you're getting the data from somewhere else, from the state, from a police department, and you're not familiar with the codes that are used. Others of you use those codes regularly yourselves, and as a result, it can be very handy to be able to create a report with very narrow columns. And you can create lots, of course you can fit a lot more if you're not spelling out each of the codes. If you're just putting a 5 or a 6 in there, it takes up much less space. So I'm actually going to shorten this up just to reflect that. Okay, so this is now, I've got a weather field and I've got a WTHR field that's a bit shorter. So let's save that. All right, so now at the bottom of my list, I should have those 2 new fields. One of them is weather, and it's just being shown plain and simple weather. The other one is not looking up weather, and so it shows you that it's got some customization going on there. So let's say okay to that. And we'll scroll out and take a look, and now you'll see that the weather column has the word in it, cloudy, clear, clear, clear. Forgot we're not going to see any snow because again we're at 75th and Cactus Road in Phoenix, or Peoria as it were. However, the next column shows you just the numeric value. WTHR that I stuck in there as an abbreviation is showing me the code behind the scenes. This is what is stored in what's called the ALICE database at the state of Arizona. Department of Transportation. That's the code that they use. So again, if those codes are familiar to you and you want to use them, all you have to do to make sure that you see those codes is not have a lookup value for any of your fields, for one of your fields. So you can pick any field you want and choose not to look up its value. So here's a direction of travel. We're playing with direction of travel there. Here's action. And this is unit action 2. Let's actually stick in another unit action 2. We'll just see how that works. So unit action 2, we'll just put another action just like that. Oh, looks like I hit 3. So unit action, let's put in a 2. I prefer 2. I'm choosing 2 because 3 frequently will not have any data in it. So again, if I look at any of these fields, if they've got a value in here, that means they're being looked up. If I take out the lookup and I return back, there'll be an action column like there's been, but as soon as this thing refreshes, we'll have another column. I'm sorry, I lost my action. Did it go? So here's another. No, that's another action. Tanya, what did I just do? Here's unit action 2. I stuck it after the second. Looks like we already have action 1 and action 2 in here. They just weren't labeled terribly nicely. And so where I placed it was after after action 2. So here's action 2, and now we're just getting an individual number for each of these. So again, if I shorten up the caption for that column, I'd get a very narrow column. And for other people, it's not just a matter of space. You actually know what those codes mean just as well as you know what the text means, and so that's fine as well. Okay, questions about using lookups in these lists? Anybody want to jump in on that? All right, then we'll move right along. So what else can we do in here? Well, recall I showed you this row number. That's a field that'll show up in your list of fields, although it's not really part of your database because it's not, you won't see it as a column in the data. It's only in each of the queries. And I believe it shows up down here as row num. There we go, row num. So that's what this field is here. And what happens is the expression, that's what's going to show up in each of these columns, is row num. But I wanted it to just say pound at the top of that column instead of actually having the word row num. But I can put row num in there and put any caption I want on it. So I can go stick in row num here and call it row number. This is what's going to be at the top of the column, and this is going to be what determines what will be displayed in that column. So there's your row number. and then the row numbers. And these will, of course, match the other row numbers at the other end because, again, we always sort them the same. All right, so some of the other stuff that I saw when I was in this list a little while ago is that we had, for example, a direction of travel that was in there that, again, was shortened to be one character. And the way we did that, let's see, direction of travel, this is a built-in filter function. And that function is a copy function. These are all documented. Let's see if we've got help in here. Filters. So this is the help button throughout the program. We'll always bring up your help navigator, and that'll be fairly context sensitive to where you are, what you're working on. As you can see, this tells me that I'm in the list panel, report tab. I've jumped one step further into the field list editor. It's not showing that, but it knows I'm on the list panel, and it knows that relevant to that will be filters. Okay, so if I open up filters in here, I should have some functions. These are all the available functions for our filter. They also work in all of the field lists for the expressions. So what we have in this case is a field that will have text in it, north, south, east, west, and we only want to get the very first character of that, NSEW. So what we have here is a string function, and we've got a number of them. This one right here is copy, and it tells me that I can copy from the string I pass in a start position and a count. Returns the substring from start position for count. So I get 3 characters, 1 character, what have you. So what's happening here is I'm asking, sorry, I apologize. I'm asking it to copy from direction of travel direction 1 from the first character for just 1 character. If I asked for 3 characters, I get the first 3 characters of the direction. Just like that. Okay, and I can paste other stuff together in there as well. I could put, we did some stuff for the City of Los Angeles requested that in one of their fields where you had, for example, a pedestrian action or I think it was a vehicle movement, and if the vehicle movement was pedestrian, I think that's a value in their database that a vehicle movement can be pedestrian, then they wanted us to grab the pedestrian action and stick it into the vehicle movement field because that's where the pedestrian information was. But they didn't want it as a column taking up space if it wasn't a pedestrian crash. So we actually put an expression in there that checked. If this is a pedestrian, then put this data in here, otherwise put other data in there. A bit advanced, but we may cover that if we have time this afternoon if someone asks about those things. So let's jump back in here. There's a couple of things that are important about what I did in here that may not be immediately obvious. So let's drop this back to 1. So a couple of things. Recall that what was happening here, let's take a simple field. Let's do our weather field again since we already have that started. I'm clicking left here to get rid of, I'm clicking left arrow to get rid of row number. And in fact, what I think I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of all these fields. Let's just get rid of all that. So this is nice and simple to see. So this is weather with lookups. This is weather without lookups. Okay. Let's stick in another weather and try to do what I just did, and you're going to see we're going to have a little bit of a problem there. I forgot to select a location for this. I'd like to do a weather first character. I just want to show the first character of weather. So I do what I just showed you how to do. And I say copy weather 1, 1. Oops. That's going to actually give me an error. It's a little bit tricky, but I'll explain why that is in a moment. So all those other fields should be going away. Okay, failed to render, error parsing, copy, expected a string, not a number, and it got a number. Okay, the first parameter that we just put in there, the weather, it said we expected a string and got a number. And so it's not able to show us that listing. Let me go back in and take a look and see why it's saying that. And the reason for that is you may have noticed that I had put an @ sign in the other expression that we were looking at when we did the copy. Well, here's what goes on. In the database, in your database, depending on how you send the data to us, this is normally a numeric field. Weather is numeric, airbag use, age, everything in here. All of these are numeric values in almost all cases. Some of them may be a character value, a single character, but most of your fields are numeric. And so this is a numeric value. The only reason that it shows up as text is because we put a lookup value in there for you, right? But when you make an expression, the expression can't go back to that lookup value. The expression is now going to be evaluated like that's a number. Well, any field that you're ever using anytime in the program, you can always put an @ sign in front of it, and that will do a lookup. So I can actually, this is worth noting here, well, let's leave this in here because this is what we wanted, is weather with the first character. I'm going to add yet another one. So I had weather in there. And let's do weather without lookup. Well, we'll say with @lookup. So I'm going to put this @ sign here. I'm going to break my rule that I showed you a little while ago. I'm going to get rid of my lookup. And the reason for that is this expression doesn't return the number 2. This expression will now actually return clear or snowy or whatever it's going to return because I've put the @ sign in front of it, which applies the lookup automatically. So what we're getting here is, let's look at each one of these. Weather with lookups is the simple weather number out of the database, and we tell it, please look that up for us. If we tell it not to look it up for us, then we're just going to get a number. If we want the first character, we can copy, but we can't copy from the number. We have to copy from a looked up value, @weather. And weather with the @lookup, I can get rid of my lookup entirely, and it'll still work because it knows to automatically look it up. This functionality works in the filters. It's used pretty heavily also in labels. As you'll see, and labels on the diagram I'll touch on as well because we use the same logic in there. So here's your weather with lookups. Here's your weather without lookups. First character, and weather without a lookup but with the @ sign ahead of it to say please do a lookup on your way. And that allows me, when I do my first character, to see the first character as opposed to getting a number. That was a path I wasn't even going to go down, but I hope that was useful to some people. This is really nice if you're going to create a report that you really do want to combine multiple things into. Let me give you another example of how we could use this. If I look here at this, let's see, so this is going to say cloudy. Here, how about this? I'm going to copy the text out of there. This is just to be able to make, this can both make some custom reports that you may want to create. It also can be handy for duplicating reports you've already got. So I could do something like this as well. And again, these are filter functions that I'd be drawing from. I'm going to go grab weather again and stick weather in one more time. And weather, oh, I can't resist, weather or not. So what I'm going to do here, see, you're all muted so I don't hear you laughing hysterically at my jokes either. If @weather equals clear, then I tell it to return nothing. Otherwise, I tell it to return whatever's in weather. So that the if function, again, is in our filter help. So I can go to filters, look at my functions, and that's a logic function. Maybe it's under miscellaneous. Here's if, and it says if this condition is true, then we're going to show value 1. Otherwise, we're going to show value 2. Okay? So what I'm doing here is I'm saying if this is true, weather is clear, I want to show nothing in that column. There is no interesting weather there. Otherwise, I do want to show the weather. Okay, so now I get something that doesn't have quite as much clutter in it if I don't want to have it there. All right. Any questions at this point? This is a little bit advanced in the expression section, in the expression use in the program. Again, also useful for filters. The only difference between these expressions and filters is that when you're creating filters, the filter result, the result of the expression, always has to be true or false. It always has to be a yes/no result. So weather equals clear would be a reasonable expression, or time greater than 4 o'clock would be a reasonable filter expression. Here we're actually returning text or numbers or what have you. And so that's the really only difference between these expressions and filters. All right, Tanya just asked about, and perhaps someone had already asked about, a carriage return line feed in here so that we can actually put multiple rows for a single crash. Right now we've just got a single row per crash. And I'm going to show you this, and this is why I stuck into Arizona, because I can't even remember at this moment what the formatting looks like, so I'm going to actually use an existing report. We haven't built a nice little checkbox to put this in, so you actually put in a little bit of syntax to get yourself a new line for a record. So let me go do that. So if I go load a report, let's create a brand new report here. I think it's the detailed report. Okay, so what we're seeing here is each of the records. So this is one record showing from here through here. Is there anything out to the right? Nothing else out to the right, so that's good. Okay, so this is one record that I've highlighted here. I'll leave that highlighted for a moment while we look at it. These are the fields up above that you're seeing in each of these rows. So the location is in here, the distance is in here. And this is distance from intersection, but we've actually, looks like we've done some very nice complex stuff here. I think we were attempting to replicate a report from the city of Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken. They had a report that they wanted to see, rather than just 210, that's the distance, then have another column that said south or feet or miles or what have you. They wanted all of that in one, and so we'll see how we assembled that using the expressions. Blank, I just put the word intentionally blank in there so that we wouldn't be trying to figure out what's going on, but that was just indented because this information up here is per accident, is per crash. It's the entire crash information. Whereas this section right here, this is vehicle 1, this is vehicle 2 showing up. Okay, and so in these, let's take a look at the rest of these. Collision manner, rear end, unit direction, not sure. Oh, this is just part of, again, the format. There was just the text unit direction in this space. And so this is the direction, and it looks like unit 1 was south, 2 was south, 1 was west, 2 was north, and so forth. This is your first harmful event. This again has just the word action in it because this is now going to show you going straight ahead, and so forth. Violation for each of the 2 vehicles. Speed too fast, no improper action. You don't have to have this information right here. If you don't want it, you can actually just put that text up in the header up here. But again, we were replicating an existing report format, and so that's what we put in there. This was trying to do as close as we could to the existing report. So let's see how this was all done. First thing I'm going to do before I go play with it, because again, I'm an admin, it'll let me edit it. I really don't want to mess it up. So I'm going to duplicate that, and I'll have a copied version of that now, and I can go edit it. You can see some of these have some complex expressions, and that's what we're about to go play with. Okay, so let's look at each one of them individually. So we have location. All right, so step 1, right out of the chute, even just for the location, we concatenated the primary and the cross street with the word and in between them. We just said this plus this is what we want to actually display. Primary street plus the word and plus the cross street. Now you may also note none of you actually have fields in your database called underscore primary street or underscore cross street. Anytime you see an underscore in any of our expressions, we're drawing on a calculated field, and in fact, not just a calculated field, but one of our required built-in calculated fields. So whenever you have the software, whatever we prepare a configuration for a new client, we have a bit of work we need to do. And one of those things that we do is we create some calculated fields so that our program knows where you keep certain data. So where primary street came from and where cross street came from, I can't even tell you out of this list, but if I ever need to get primary and cross street, I can get it using these fields. And the way you can access those fields, this is, you'll notice at the top it says query fields, and that's what's in this green area is all of your query fields. These are ones that came from your database. And for some of you, talking directly at you, this means you've been entering these fields into your database. Kim, I'm talking to you. You actually changed these fields, and you know every one of those field names. Now, someone, for example, Minar out of Arizona, looks at this field list and goes, oh, that's interesting. That's the fields that Alice has for me. That's the fields that the Arizona standard data contains for me. But if I pointed to this one, he'd say, I don't know what's in that field because he didn't create this, he doesn't run with it. And as a result, and neither do we, and that's the important part of this, if we wanted to find where the primary street was, well, we do it first when we set up the program, but after that, we don't want to have to guess at which field it is every time. So these fields come out of the database query. There are other places you can get fields from. The most common places you may look are in either the P defaults, now these are ones that we create and we maintain for you, or the user specific. And user specific are ones that we've created that relate mostly to your data. So if we've created a calculated field, let's use an example where an agency has a, Tanya, give me an example of a user specific. If we just want to know for our own configuration purposes whether it was a bicycle collision. Let's actually see. We'll see what's in here. This is a good one. In Arizona, there are a dozen values for this field called physical. And I believe it's the physical condition like drug use or sleepy or something like that. And so there's a dozen for every driver. Driver 1, driver 2, and driver 3 each get a dozen of these values, and you can see them in here. If I go into my regular query fields that I normally had, and I scroll down, look at this. Physical, 0, 1, 2, 3 for every one of the drivers. And then after getting the 10 there, then it goes into A's, B's, C's, and D's. So what they're doing is they're getting, for example, the driver might have been drowsy and might have had drugs, or might have been DUI and something else. And that allows them to specify all of those things. But as a user, you're going to have a hard time playing with that. If you want to filter on these or if you want to find out were they DUI, that's a lot trickier to find out. So we built an expression, doesn't even show up here, it's in the background. We built an expression that gets the most serious condition for physical for driver 1 and for driver 2 and driver 3. And we did that just by combining them. We looked at them and analyzed them and said, okay, this is more serious than this is more serious than this. And this is now the most serious one for each of those values. That was part of the configuration. But these fields are now available to the end user as though they were fields in the database. Now, the one I'm looking for right here was under P default. I know that we created one called primary street, and we created one called cross street. And that's what was used in order to create this expression to get primary and cross street in that report. Okay, I'm going to drop back so you can see what the result is of that. When we run this, that's this field right here. Okay, so that's the 75th Ave is primary street, the word and that we pasted in, and Cactus Road. So that's one example. Let's jump into another one. Any questions on that? I'll stop for just a moment. Nope. Okay. So that was location. Let's see if there's other tricky stuff going on here. This is collision matter. That's fine. First harmful. What I'm doing right now is I'm scanning. I'm clicking here, and then I'm looking over at the expression to see. In fact, you know what? Here we go. I'll keep that small for a little bit so we don't have to scroll back and forth. I'm just looking here to see, when I click on this, is there a complex expression or is it simple, just the field name? Incident date and time. Whenever you insert your date into a field list, the program automatically knows that it's a date and it puts in a format date function for you. And it formats whatever field you had asked for, the incident date time. As a result, when you, I'm actually going to bring this out a little bit, when you specify incident date and sticks it in, you'll always get month, day, year. And you'll get a 4-character year, and you'll get a 2-character month, 2-character day, and you'll get a 1 or more character month. And then you'll get the, in this case, we're actually looking for time. This is an incident date and time field. So we'll also get the hour, minutes, and AM or PM. But if I just wanted to get 2 digits for the year, and if I wanted only 1 digit for the day if we didn't need 2 digits, then I could do that. I could also decide that in this case, I really don't want the time attached to it. All I wanted was the date. Okay, date, time, and I'll say just date. All right, I'll save that and we'll pop back and see how that affected that, because that's an expression on the incident date time. So what you were seeing there now was the default. And right now, all we're seeing is that. And we should be able to find, there we go, 8, 9. In this case, there's no 0, 9 in there. It's just a 9 because we took out the second parameter, the second month, the second M in that string. So what that's doing is it's just formatting whatever date the way you want the date formatted. And I kept saying that was default. As I think about it, that's not really default. That was, again, specific to the report that we were trying to replicate here. So it was exactly what the person had requested for that. All right. Total injuries. So let's see what we've got here. This now says the word injured, right? This is in quotes, so it's just going to say the word injured, and then it's going to have the number of injuries. And I'm using that @ sign to get a hold of an injury field. This is another neat use of this. If you have just a numeric value, total injuries, again, you can't stick that into a string. I can't add a string to a number. This is if you're thinking about like Excel or something like that, if you wrote an expression in there and you tried to add a number 5 to a string, it wouldn't allow you to do that. Same with us. But if you've got a number there, rather than having to do some fancy function to turn it into a string, you can just put an @ sign on the front of it because it's a field, and it'll turn that into a string of whatever number that is if there's no lookups for it. So this both does a lookup, but it'll also take a number and turn it into a string as well. So it pretty much makes any field into a text string, into a text value. So we get injured, total injuries, fatals, total fatals. I'll tell you what I think I may just do here. We didn't change anything. So this is this field right here, injured and fatals. What I'm going to do is I'm going to real quick take a snapshot of this. And that way, as I show you what this thing is doing, we don't have to keep popping in and out of the report. Okay, so we just looked at the date, we looked at the total injuries. Incident ID, they simply wanted RPT pound or period number ahead of their incident ID. So we put RPT number in front of their incident ID, and the result is this. So again, trying to replicate an existing report or create something custom for your report, that's the way to do it. Here's the magic of the carriage return line feed. So this is the last column in the report, and we wanted to wrap over and start a new row and be in a new column for the next one. So let's see what we actually stick in there. First of all, I'm going to check and see if there's anything advanced. Nothing advanced, so good. We don't have to worry about that. So here's what you must do. And to be honest, I don't think we've got documentation for this. Tanya, would you please make a note to ask me to document this later? I'd like to put this in, or you can document this later. It is required that you put CRLF for carriage return line feed in the field title and CRLF in the expression. Doing that creates that carriage return line feed. You'll notice it doesn't show up as a column, right? It would be right here. But instead, that column is dismissed because it says it's a CRLF column. It's dismissed, and you just get the carriage return line feed without anything displaying. So doing that causes a new row to start, and we move on. We're back to the next field, which is distance. Wow, look at that expression. So in this case, the request was to have the word distance, the units of distance, and the direction from the intersection. So we've got here, now this is interesting. We have a field in our system already that is always in feet. And so we were able to not have to go put in their field that tells the units. We actually have everything in feet. So I actually hard-coded into this that it's in feet. And so we don't have anything here that's going and grabbing their units field. So all this does is it says, put the word distance in, that's what's in quotes, then add distance from intersection, that's the field. And I told this to turn it into a string. Distance from intersection is normally a number, and I told it to turn that into a string. That's what that formatting is. Then it adds feet, and then we're looking, and then we're doing a case statement. And a case statement is like saying, if this, then this. Else, if this, then this. Otherwise, if it's this, then this. And what happens is we have a field called direction from intersection, which could be a value of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or it has a wrong value in it. And so all the case statement does is it says take that field, direction from intersection, and if it's a 0, don't put anything there. If it's a 1, put a north there. If it's a 2, put a south there. If it's a 3, put an east there. If it's a 4, put a west there. Otherwise, as a default, put an O for other. So the result of that is this field here, and it's just this little bit right here. And again, if you simply want this value to be displayed in your report, this is actually blank because there was no, it was a 0 value, right? That was this right here. If it was a 0, it doesn't put anything in, right? So if all you want is that S in the report, you can put it in its own column, and that'll work fine. But as the creator of this report knew, this is a lot more efficient use of your space. If you're trying to put a lot of data in here, this would have taken 3 columns to show up using the raw data from the system. For those that have played with calculated fields, I will just mention, and we can cover this either in another session or at the end of this if someone asks, you can create a calculated field that has all of this in one place, and therefore, and then you build that into your configuration, and at that point, all you have to do is put the name of that calculated field here. Distance and direction, one word, would be what you'd put in here, and that would be the name of your calculated field. And you wouldn't need a nice long expression. This expression would be on the administrator side as a calculated field. That's if you've played with calculated fields. Okay, let's see what else you've got in here. Unit, we just wanted the text in there. That was this stuff up here, like that. And I'm sorry, that, unit dir, action, vision obscurement. Those are all just hard-coded in here. They're just a piece of text. We're not looking at the field at all. That's why that's what those quotes mean. Is the quotes are just, that's a piece of text we want to stick in there. As soon as you put something in quotes, you're dealing with the literal string, not with any of the fields. Then we do another carriage return line feed, exactly the same, right? That's the end of this line. And we go down to the next line. Again, the same intentionally blank, and that's just because we wanted for each of these to have a blank field to indent it. And then we head into unit number, action, environmental condition, and so forth. Let's see if any of these have other functions we haven't looked at. That's one we've already looked at. That's nothing special, nothing special. These are just the basic fields, so those are pretty straightforward to stick in. Then the carriage return, and these will be exactly the same as Unit 1. So that is a report that displays in multiple lines and also does the extra added piece of building these fields, complex fields. Let's build a new report that does a carriage return line feed that doesn't actually that doesn't actually have all those extra calculations in it. So I'm going to build a brand new one. Let's see if untitled is in use. It's just primary cross street. We'll create a new one. So this is how I create a new field list. Okay, right now we're in an existing one, but I'm just going to create a whole new field list. Go to my edit field list. And now I'm just going to grab a few fields out of here. So I'm going to grab incident ID. And I'm going to hold my control key down so I can select multiple columns out of here. This is like any other Windows program. So I'm going to choose, for example, make of the vehicle, 1 and 2. Actually, you know what? We're going to skip. We're going to do those as the second row. So we're going to do first is the incident ID. We're going to do the incident year. We're going to do the severity for the whole crash. So now what I'm doing is I'm picking crashes or data that relate to the entire crash, not to one vehicle. I'll grab weather and I'll grab lighting. And lighting. Let's stick those in there. And I could reorder those if I want. I'm actually pretty happy with that order, so I'm going to leave that just as it is. And then I mentioned that you could put in here a carriage return line feed. But if I do that, of course, I lose weather, which would be okay. I could put in another weather if I wanted. The other thing I can do is I can stick in an empty field. That's this guy right here, build an expression. So I stick that in, and it says custom, and I do what I described before. CRLF, and in quotes, CRLF. That gives me my carriage return. Now we're going to go grab some vehicle 1 information and paste it in. So let's see what we've got for the age of driver 1 and age of driver 2. I'm sorry, just age of driver 1. We're just grabbing all ones first here. So age 1, we'll find I don't know what extra action is. Sorry, looking for something relevant to show here. Injury area for driver 1. Injury status for driver 1. Most, nope. And let's see what else we got here. Okay, unit action 1. I think that'll probably do us for right now. Okay, so I'll insert those. That's all driver 1 information. And I'll stick in another carriage return line feed. And now I can grab driver 2 information. So I'll grab age of driver 2, and I'll go looking for injury area of driver 2. And I'll look for injury status of driver 2. And unit action for 2. And that's it. And I'll insert those. So now what I've done is I've put in some basic crash information. I've put in some driver information and more driver information. And to make this perfectly clean, you'd probably want to have the same number of fields here as here, just so that they line up, but not absolutely necessary. So I'll save that. And now my field list is still untitled. We can change. So why don't we do this? We'll call this multi-line. So I'm going to click up here. That allows me to rename it, and I'll say multi-line. And I say OK. Okay, so now I have my incident ID, year, severity, junction related, lighting condition, and weather. That's the first row. And then this is second row for the first driver, third row for the third driver. Second driver, sorry. So that's very basic use of carriage return line feeds without having to do any of the calculations for all the individual fields. Okay. Questions on carriage return line feed other than please make it a checkbox? Okay. Alrighty. Let's see what else we've got here. So So this was a field list, and I want to show you another place where field lists are really handy. I'm not going to be able to use the carriage return line feed field list for this, so I just want to make sure I've got some other field lists to use. So I've got the PD basic field list, I've got the case ID, good, I'll use those. So another thing you can do with any report you've got, whether I'm on a listing, a chart, any of these reports, at the bottom of the screen there will always be this button. If you're looking at any report or if you're looking at a study, and it's called Export Crash Records from the current study. If I click on that, I'm prompted to export the study as one of these formats. But if you think about it, I'm exporting a study, not a report. Okay, we're exporting the data from the study, the crash records. In order to do that, we need to know what fields you want to export. We use field lists for that. So here's the list of those very same field lists that I had. And so I can choose, for example, PD basic field list, and then I pick a format to export that to. I'm going to choose a full XLSX. This is an Excel formatted file. The one benefit of using this over using a CSV, if you just want data and you're going to go play with it somewhere else, you can use the CSV. But if you put it in XLSX format, it will actually format the fields to their appropriate data types. And so I click on XLSX, it says export, and I say open. All right, and so this is now Excel. I'm going to enable editing on here. It knows it just downloaded it from the internet. And so these are now formatted as date. If you've ever exported to CSV and brought it into, or if you just tried to import a CSV file into Excel, you'll frequently see dates that suddenly look like they were formatted as a whole long number, and so they'll have pound, you'll get all those pound signs as if it was too short, and so forth. This will not do that. This will always have things formatted the way they're supposed to be if you export it as Excel. The reason I bring this one up is just simply because we're using those field lists that we had, and I'll let you see how those show up. This case ID was just those 3 columns. Okay. This allows you to export data for any study to be analyzed somewhere else. If you're more facile with another program for formatting for charting or for, I have one client that uses this for pivot tables all the time. And if you're familiar with pivot tables, that's a real handy way to do this. Real quick question. How many of you are familiar with pivot tables and would find it useful to be doing pivot tables with the CrashMagic data, or are already doing pivot tables with the CrashMagic data? Just put a quick note in the chat if you use pivot tables. I'm just curious. Looking at the chat. Rick, yes? I should do a little training on this one. Using pivot table in Excel, so no need for CrashMagic, exactly. Using CrashMagic data, but not in CrashMagic specifically. So there are a few of you that use pivot tables, and I'm not going to go into the great details of them because I am not as facile with pivot tables as I might be. So I'd use some bad examples here. But what a pivot table is the ability to, essentially it's like crosstabs, but it's recategorizing your data. Drilling down into your data, taking a large amount of data and saying, oh, let's get all the, by year, let's group them all by year first, then we'll take them all by injury in addition to that, and it just recategorizes your data repeatedly. And we don't have a function for that in CrashMagic. It's actually something that's now become on our list after seeing what somebody's been doing in Excel with our data. But let me tell you what's very handy that you could do. I have a client in Fort Collins, Colorado here, who had been they've been using Crystal reports actually to do a bunch of reporting. And then they would take the output from that reporting and bring it into Excel and use it for pivot tables. But what it meant was they kept having to export that data out because they had a special report they'd created with the equivalent of calculated fields that we have in CrashMagic. And so they had this calculated fields field list essentially that they had to keep bringing into Excel. And I showed her she could create that calculated fields list in CrashMagic and not have to go through that process in Crystal. And that saved her a little bit of time, and she liked that. And so now she's exporting out of CrashMagic into a CSV format. This was about 6 months, a year ago, as CSV. What did that mean? Well, it meant that what she had to do was in order to join, in order to do pivot tables and so forth, you have to convert your data from CSV into Excel. So she'd import it. She'd take that whole data and she'd import it into an Excel spreadsheet as the first page, and then she'd have other pages that did the analysis, that did the pivot tables, did some charts, did some neat stuff with it. So what that meant was every time she wanted to change the data, she had to export the data and copy and paste it into Excel, into that spreadsheet. Well, what she then did, she took a second step. Once we had these XLSX, we could actually produce an Excel file. And if you're not familiar with it, you can have Excel point to another Excel file. So she could actually have all of her expressions in one spreadsheet, one file, point to this other file for its source data. Now she could just export this way as an Excel spreadsheet, put the file out there called data, and her other Excel spreadsheet just pointed to the data file. And that made things a lot easier. I'm going to throw one last one at you. Those of you not familiar with what I'm referring to or dealing with SQL databases, plug your ears for a minute so you don't get too thrown. But this is a brand new feature in the program. Oh, it may not even be in demo. Let's take a look. Yes, it is. We gave her the ability to expose an SQL server to CrashMagick, to our system. And what she now has the ability to do is click on a field list, like for example our detailed field list, but it can be anything. In her case, she gets almost all the fields, puts them in a field list. She has a connection, that's on the administrator side, to her database, right? So she connects to the actual database in her agency, and that's open through the firewall, and she specifies a table, 1994 crashes, and she clicks export. And when she does that, it creates a table in her SQL server that she can join to through Crystal reports, through Excel, through anything else she wants, and it can be whichever set of data she wants. So she could do, PED only, and then she can link into that table. So this sort of gives you the ability, it's not quite the same as connecting straight into our database, but it allows you to create tables on your own server that are a reflection of our database. Okay, just so I can see if everybody's eyes were rolling, does that make anything interesting? Is that interesting to anybody out there? A few of you said you were doing pivot tables. If you're playing a lot with Excel, there may be some interest in that. And if there's something that is close to that that you'd like to see, I'd be interested in hearing about that. Again, in order to export that data, to use that function, you'd use a field list, the same type of field list we just created. Okay. Tanya, where else are we playing with field lists in here? We've done exports. Oh, one kind of handy thing we can do with a field list. Let's jump into one of these guys. So we've covered charts in the past, and we've used category lists. Let me actually go to a basic listing here. We've used category lists, and most of you have seen some charts in the past. We covered some yesterday as well in the beginning session. Charts use a category list, which is just a breakdown of a field, right? Categorization of the values in a particular field. We can take a category list and highlight your listings, highlight any of your reports. So this is the category list, and what it does is if I click on this, it sets a category list for the current study. So let's choose a category list of time of day. So that's saying that depending on the time of day, we're going to pick a different color for each one of those. And this allows you to go to the field list, and it highlights the field list by time of day. Okay, and you can do that for any field. I can pick severity, any categorical category list. So any categorical field you could do that with. I can pick collision type or what have you. What's kind of neat about this as well is if you do a collision diagram of this very same location, the diagram will also be highlighted in that same way. And so you can print out reports that have both the listing and the diagram will be highlighted to match the listing, depending on what category list you've chosen. If you watched yesterday, we did, I showed you a layout where you can put, for example, the diagram next to a couple of charts or next to a chart and a listing. That's a handy way to do this, is you can actually create on one page a diagram, a chart showing the category, so a severity chart in this case, followed by the listing of all the crashes at that location. One PDF and you're all set. You basically have a single report. You just run that one report and you've got your listing along with the collision diagram, along with the category that you've selected as a chart. That's a subject. I don't know if we have a session set up, Tanya, for layouts, but layouts would be a fantastic session to have. You can let me know if we have that. All right. Where else have we got listings?
I think you were going to talk briefly about labels, and since you're on this screen, it might be a good time.
Perfect. Thank you. What I mentioned was two things about labels. I talked about putting row numbers in for labels, and I also talked about the fact that we use those @ signs when we're creating labels. So on a collision diagram, if you're looking at the graphics and the labels have square brackets around them, that means you haven't even specified a label. We're using our case ID field, the one that we know is your case ID field. We're using that on the collision diagram. But you can customize those labels. You can put anything you want in them. Excuse me, other than a carriage return line feed. That's something I'd like to implement, but we haven't gotten into that at all. So you'll see in the label, there is no content showing there. Drawing on what we just did a minute ago where I said this is just an expression and you can put anything in there, I can just put a couple of quotes in there. That's a valid expression that has nothing in it. That would actually take labels off the diagram. There'd be no labels at all. Okay, it's just putting a blank next to each one of those. But what I mentioned was the other thing is you have fields you may want to use that have lookups. And you recall that when you're building, if you go into the expression editor here to build labels, you can pick out from any of these fields. Let's grab, you can either look at your query fields, right? And these are your query fields. But again, if you stick these in, some of them are numbers, some of them are going to be text. You can't always tell. We add another one called query fields LU, and if you look at the list down below, none of them have @ signs. If I click on this, all of them get @ signs. Now I can put any of these in. Let's clear my current expression, and let's stick in, for example, collision manner. And I could even put in plus, and we'll put a space in between after collision manner. And these don't have to be on different lines or anything. I'm just choosing to put them that way. Put them on the same line if I like. And I can put in addition to collision manner, I could put in incident ID. Put in any other field. Because the @ sign's there, it's automatically being turned into a string, so you can always paste those together and put them onto the diagram. So this is now @ collision manner, a space, and the incident ID as a label. So that's the use of that same @ sign that we saw in the field list. Okay, so that's the collision manner and then the case number. The other thing I mentioned was if you created a field list that you were going to keep with the collision diagram or put in the same PDF, and I'm just going to skip all the way in here to just doing @row num rather than going into the list and picking it, but it is in the same list we just were looking at. I'm just going to put in row num, and now rather than having, oops, not what I expected to see. That's odd. I was expecting I was going to see my row num. It's apparently coming up with an error, and that's why I'm getting my defaults in there. There we go. Row num does not want to try to be looked up. So if I put row num in, every crash gets a unique value in the diagram. And so you can now produce a listing like the one that we saw that has, here, I think it was in the PD basic listing, that has just those numbers at the start. Now this collision diagram matches that list, these numbers right here. So if you put them side by side on 2 sheets of paper, you've now got a listing that matches that diagram. And in fact, why don't we do that? I'm actually going to strip out some of our weather stuff here. This will be kind of a neat finale for this piece of it, and then I think we'll go on to questions. So I'm going to go into this field list copy we have right here, and I'm going to get rid of a bunch of these weathers. and say save and return. What I'm doing is I'm making it a little bit narrower of a report because I know I'm going to stick it on a piece of paper with not a lot of extra space, as you'll see. Okay, so I've got this field list, basic listing. I'm going to save this as a template. This is something that we cover in other sessions, not here, but I'm going to save this as a template as example with RowNum. And I'll create that as a template. Now I have a report called example with RowNum, and I'm actually going to do the same thing for my diagram because my diagram has been customized as well. Right, my diagram now has these interesting labels on it, and so I'm going to save this one back as a template. And this is diagram with RowNum. Did I call the other one diagram with RowNum? What did I just call that? Well, we'll see it in a moment. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a layout. And you saw a little bit of this layout yesterday, but this will be building one from scratch. I'm going to choose our default layout. And what a layout is a PDF file. That's what this is right here. I got a PDF file and it's got space for me to put things. And in this case, I've got a big area here to put the report, and that's a default report. If you print a chart, if you print a listing or a diagram, all the content goes right here. But we have other types of layouts. And one of ours is landscape 1x1. And so what that is I've got two areas, this area and the main area, to put content in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose for our main area the diagram that I just put in. So I have my DGM with RowNum in it. So my diagram is going to go there, and on the right-hand side, I'm going to put that list. And that one's name I'm forgetting, example with RowNum, which is a list. Now when I take a look at that, this report will always have both of those reports attached to it in two different areas. So now these numbers here match these numbers. Now what's kind of neat about this is I can take this entire layout and save it with as RowNum diagram list. Yeah, we'll just call it diagram list. So now that I've gone and I've made all of those reports, right? I've made a template for my diagram with row number as a label. I've made a template for my listing with RowNum as a label. And now I've made a template for the entire layout that uses both of those. Now I can drop down here to 75th and Peoria. Go up to my layouts. This is where all my layouts are kept that I've saved back. And I've got this diagram list. And that's now available to me for any of my studies. I can just click on a study, specify that I want that layout, and I get that very same layout every time. Now you notice the highlighting didn't occur here. We talked about being able to highlight. I can actually categorize by anything. I can categorize these. Let's jump in here. I can categorize by time of day, for example. Sorry, a little bit of mess on the screen there. Categorize by time of day, and that will impact all reports inside of that study. See, this is time of day here. So now this is time of day, highlighting on the diagram time of day, and again, still the row number matching up with the row numbers for labels. In there.
So Pete, someone asked if the category list could be modified, the colors and the ranges and so forth.
Absolutely. Let me stop for a moment here. That is not a field list question, but I'm going to, because that is definitely for charts, but I can easily take that question in just a moment if we don't have questions about field lists. So let's start right now. I'm done with presentations on field lists. I've done everything in the whole program that ever comes near a field list. And so if I've raised questions about the field list, let's address those, and then let's take it back and talk about anything anybody would like, which includes this first one about modifying category lists. Questions about field lists? And then Matt will be right with you. Okay, we're on our way. So, category lists. Let's grab here, let's see if there's some data in this one. Again, this is from yesterday's training, and so I need to make sure that we've actually got some valid data and valid values. Okay, great. What I'm going to do is sort of start from scratch on a category list. So I'm going into this category list here, and I've created a collision manner category list, and these are the colors and the expressions that represent that category list. So let's go in and edit those. Well, so let's create a brand new one. How about that? Since you asked about that, let me bail all the way out of here. So let's create a new category list. And when you create a category list, you can do it manually. All right, I've created a new category list, and you can do this on chart screens. That's the easiest place to do it, is on the chart screen. Because you get to see the results right away. That's why it's a good place to work on it. So this is the list in here of all the bins that are in the category list. And it's not your screen. There's nothing in there. We just created a brand new one, so it's blank. And I could individually add a category for anything I wanted. We could put age in here. We could put, category, weather, lighting, what have you. Or I can pick a field. So if I say fill category list, I can pick a field out of here. And let's grab something that's just going to be very obvious as we're working with it. We'll choose weather. This is your category list and your category list editor. These are now all the values that will be showing on the category list, and these are the expressions that will determine whether or not a crash falls into that category. So if clear is the value for weather, then it's going to fall into this bin. If it's cloudy, it'll go into this bin. An example of something that some people may want to do with the category list would be, for example, to say that this blowing sand, soil, and dirt, I'm just copying that to my clipboard, that this should really be in the same place as smoke and fog and smog. Well, because we use this function AnyMatch, this is an expression function, it's just like saying weather equals weather, fog, smoke. But because I use AnyMatch, it'll look for a whole list of values. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to add something else in there. And in fact, perhaps blowing snow is in that same category. So let's go grab the value for blowing snow out of here. Okay, so I've put these three values, fog, smog and smoke, sand, soil and dirt, and snow, and I put them all into this. So I'm going to call this dirty, snowy air. And just get rid of our description here. And I'm going to go to this blowing snow, and I'm going to get rid of it, because now we're covering it in the dirty, snowy air category. And I'm going to get rid of blowing sand, soil, and dirt. So I've just modified the category list by combining several of the categories into one, dirty, snowy air. That's one thing I've done. Now I'm going to say I'd like to change the color for dirty, snowy air. And we'll make it, how about light steel blue for dirty snow? It wants to be darker than that, right? There we go, slate gray. That's our dirty, smoky, snowy air. We could choose clear to have a color of, let's make something pretty light. Cloudy, be something a little bit darker. Sleet, hail, rain, drizzle, rain, and so forth. So I can change all of those colors Yeah, rain is plum. And snow might just be white or something close. And so forth. We have all of those. So now I've redefined this category list. And I will save and return it. And I've modified my category list. Just to show you all of those colors, you may not recall from yesterday, but we checked a checkbox here whether or not we wanted to see empty bins. And I had that hidden, so if there's no data that matches any of those fields, you wouldn't see it. But those are now the colors that I set for each one of those. And you can see my dirty, snowy air existing as a category in its own, and those other categories not shown. I can use that I can use that now down here if I want. So where I just had my diagram list was in, is this the one? Yeah. I'm going to click on 75th and Peoria, and I'm going to change my category list. I'm going to set my category list to weather, which is that new weather one that I just came up with. And now anything in here is being highlighted that way, including that entire PDF that has lots of several reports in it. So that's now the highlighting for the clear and cloudy, and if we had dirty, snowy air, we'd have that in there as well. All right.
So Matt would actually like an example for the time of day where the ranges are numeric.
Thinking. Example for time of day where the ranges, oh, I'm sorry, wasn't thinking straight there. So we don't have the ability to automatically create a category list for non-categorical fields. So if you have lookups, we can do that very simply. If you don't have lookups, if it's time of day from like a time date field, we don't have that. However, as a result of knowing that we don't have that, we have created category lists. Sorry, let's grab a, let's jump to another report here. Okay, we've created one, for example, for time of day, because we recognize that it's complicated to create one of these. I'll show you what they look like. This is how you would do it if you wanted to create it manually. I'm going to duplicate my time of day. So I have a time of day copy because I can't mess with that one. It's a shared resource. I'm going to click on edit. As you can see, this is one someone took some time to create at one point. So these bins were all created manually. Nobody went in and just clicked on time of day and it just built this out. But what happened is we said, okay, let's make a 12 a.m. one. We named the bin 12 a.m. and that's just a name, just a piece of text. This is a description, again, just a piece of text. And then this in range simply checks to see if a particular number is in between two values. And in this case, we grabbed a date, we formatted it, hours, hours, minutes, minutes. So it became a number as opposed to having a colon or anything like that in there. So we formatted it as an actual number and said, is it in between 0 and 59? Then we took 1 a.m. and said, is this number between 100 and 159? So this basically becomes military time. And then we check it to see whether it's in between 1 and 159. Does that answer your question, Matt? I could give you, if you could give me a real specific example of what you'd like to create, I can help you with that as well. This is our built-in time. That got the answer for you. Great. I will tell you, whenever we get into stuff like this, that your eyes, if your eyes start rolling back to the back of your head, and given that everybody stayed on the line today, that's really fantastic. That means at least you're interested in seeing the results of these things. If you get in a place though where your eyes are kind of rolling back going, oh my gosh, how do I do that? Ask us. We will either show you how to do it if that's your interest, or we'll create it for you in most cases if we're able to just do that. We'll create charts, listings, stuff like that, just to help make sure you have that as a resource. One of the great things about Crash Magic and doing this is that once we create it, it's there and available, right? It's up in this shared list for you to use, for anybody else in your agency to use. If you request something like a time of day chart that will be useful for all of our users, it becomes global to the application. Like this, time of day is something that every one of our clients will see in here. They won't see these, but they'll all have month of year and day of week and day of month because they were complicated to create. So we built them and did that. So if anybody ever has one of those, the best thing you can possibly do is send us a piece of paper that says this is what I'm looking for, and let us build one of those for you. Other questions? Okay. Just a, oops. Can a category list utilize multiple data fields? Absolutely. I'm not sure if I've got them here. There's two things about a category list. Sorry about that. Had a little bit of noise in the office. There are two things that a category list can do that are kind of interesting. One of them is, by default, let's jump into my time of day here. And oh, actually, no, we have a great one here for Peoria. Now that I think about it, we've got a very cool category list here. Rick, this one's going to be yours. Rick's still on? Rick's gone already. Okay, but I'm going to show you this anyway. So we created a crosstab, and I'll actually have to see which category list we used for it, but we have a crosstab here. Years, type, and severity. So this is a report that actually shows year down the left side, and across the top it has type of collision, and it's got an injury severity, and then it's got a total across the sides and the bottom. Well, this is interesting because if you were to add up everything here, that's greater than 7, right? I got 7 rear ends, plus I got 5 PDOs and 2 injuries. That number should be 14. But of course, because we've picked on another category list, we've grabbed essentially combined two category lists into one. We know that the total here should not include the second category list pieces. So let's see what that actually looks like. This particular one uses 2 category lists. One of them, this is the year. It's that category list called 2011 to 14. It's an old one. Another one is called type and severity. So we're going to go edit this category set. This is kind of diving in. Actually, you know what we'll do? Yeah, that's still good. Type and severity. I'm going to go edit that. So here's my type and severity, and it's got angle, head-on, left turn, rear end, side swipe, and then it's got other, PDO, fatal, and injury. Okay. To edit this, it looks just like any other category list editing except for one thing. So here's your angle. We're checking for angle. Here's head-on. It's checking for head-on. Gets down to PDOs. And injury and fatality are false. Now here's the interesting part. These do not sum to 100% of the data. They sum to more than 100% of the data. As a result, we have to check a checkbox here that says it's okay. Crashes can exist in multiple bins. If we didn't do that, we would get an error every time we ran this because the program would say, I've had to put the same crash in multiple bins. And it wouldn't like that. So it would give you an error. So that's feature number one, or interesting note number one, is that a category list can allow for crashes to be put into multiple bins like that. And what this would look like, I think we can make a chart of this. Let's bail all the way out of this and go back to the top and just see if we can make a chart of that single one. That was not an error, that was your imagination. Okay, so I'm going to go in here, I'll create a chart. And my chart will be category list. Oops, let's just create a simple one. It doesn't really matter. Whenever you create a chart, you have to pick from an existing chart report, and then you can change the category list afterwards. So that was just some report that was there. Now I'll change my category list to the one we just looked at, and that was type and severity. Okay, so this has all rear ends plus property damage and injury in there. So that's a category list that crosses multiple fields, but they're in their own bins. You can most certainly also do, let's see if we can duplicate this, edit this. And I'm not going to actually go about doing this because I don't have a good example in my mind, but I could take angle and say angle with PDO, and I could add another bin, and that other bin could be angle injury. There's my angle injury. Okay, so I could have an angle with PDO, and I could put the expression in here exactly the same as this, right? So here's my PDO. I can grab that expression, have angle with PDO, and I can just say, and that. And now this particular bin will only accept crashes that are angle collisions and PDOs. So that allows you to get as complex as you want with those. I should note for people that are playing with Excel or have been using other languages, you do not have to use in our system things like EQ. You can certainly put an equal sign in, and for AND, you can also just put an AND sign in, and if you had an OR, that's not an OR, but if you had an OR, you could put an OR in. Before everybody starts bailing, I just want to thank everybody for coming and remind you that we do these once a month on a Wednesday and then on Thursdays, I guess twice a month, a beginner on Wednesday and a more advanced or topic specific is probably a better description of it on Thursdays. And by all means contact us if you need help with any of this. We'd like to make sure you can use the program to its fullest. And with that, I will continue on. I've still got another 20 minutes for anybody that wants to hang out. Matt, did that answer your question? Can the crosstab report be run for a large number of intersections and sorted from most total crashes? You can run a crosstab report in as much data as you want. You can run it on the entire system. And so if you had, for example, well, we'll run that particular crosstab. I'll make a new study here that'll grab all of our data. And so as I mentioned, there are different study types. Intersection is what we've been using. I'm just going to choose date range here. And it looks like we're going to get the first 9 months of 2016, but let's get rid of that intersection stuff. Great, so that's date range. So there's 1,500 crashes there. It can go as large as you want. There, you know, it'll take a little while to run in some cases. Pick a crosstab. And we can run our years versus type and severity. Tanya, do you recall when you set up Peoria on the demo system, did you put a new config in or did you use an old config, an existing?
It would have used whatever was on Alice for hosted because it would have inherited from there.
From hosted, the data would have, I'm sorry, I meant the configuration. I'm thinking some of these got changed on hosted and may not have been brought back down. I'll tell you why, is because right now we're seeing everything's falling into other for years because we did 2016, and we do have a newer by year that'll include all the years. That's a better one to use. I was just curious if you had updated the Alice configuration on demo in the process of setting that up.
No.
Okay. Good to know. Okay, well, that's an exciting crosstab, and there's your 2016 data showing up on there. I am going to choose one option here that I can do with crosstabs and say I don't need to see empty rows in this case. So Matt, hopefully that answers your question about large number of intersections, but now you're talking about sorted from most number of crashes. Now that's a high crash location list. Let me think. So you're just looking at a high crash location. So we did this. Let's see if we've got, this will be a high crash location list for our all data. See if this is the question you've got. So let's do intersections by severity. See if this is the answer to your question. Is that the kind of thing you're looking for? Pete waits, hoping that's what Mike's looking for. And then I'll show you what I did if you say yes, that's what you're looking for. Cool. All right, so what this is, this is a simple high crash location list. So basically you create an all data study, something that incorporates all the data that you want to include. You can still filter that. So if you have signalized intersections, is signalized a field in Peoria? In the Alice data, I wonder? If I create a new filter here, I might be able to find signalized. If anybody knows the field name who's from Arizona and can tell me what signalized is, that would be most helpful. It's of course not going to be signalized. Matt, do you happen to know the field that tells us whether the crash occurred at a signalized intersection? Okay, not seeing that, but we could filter on anything. So at intersection, is that something I've actually got? Well, we would look for a field, whatever field you had there, and I'll grab here just as an example, collision manner equals rear end. But you could pick intersection related crashes, you could pick distance from intersection, whatever you'd like to do. So that becomes your filter for this entire report, and now these numbers should go down because they'll just be including rear end collisions. Some of those may have all been rear end collisions, but this is now filtered by that particular filter. So to get these to show up, what I did was I actually just chose this report. It's actually a little bit complex to build these. What I would request is if you've got a particular one that you want, this report you've already got. This is in your system. This is a high crash location list. And I'm saying this is, you've got this. You are also in Arizona, I assume. Is Matt in from Arizona? Plano, Texas. I have to make one of these that's available to you, and I may be able to use the same one we did for Arizona, but I have to customize that a little bit. But what I did there was I chose a different, you have one called intersection location list that doesn't have the categorization. It'll rank the intersections, but it will not categorize them into different groups. So we can build you one that has the fields you want out as a category list out to the side. Yours would just look like this. We can add those. I can show you how to do that as well, not something appropriate to this training. It involves this screen right here, which lets you build your high crash location list to contain whatever columns you want out here and pretty much do whatever math you want out here. A little bit tricky to do, so I would offer to do that, and then you can tweak it after that would probably be the best bet. All right, any other questions, any category? All right, is Manar still on? Manar. So this is information for everybody, especially if you weren't here yesterday. We have made, I'm not sure if I even have those images anymore. We have made a change to, or an enhancement, I guess, to how we're going to allow you to create reports or enable you to create reports. And right now, the way all reports are created is that you start by looking at a study. And you take the study, you've populated it, you've now got data, and then you ask for a report, and you go pick from that a report type. Due to some really good suggestions by Manar quite some time ago, we've been working on changing the sequence of how you build these as an option. You'll still have this functionality forever, but we're going to start it so that you can actually have your favorite reports, essentially this list, your favorite reports just come up on a screen. One single screen, the reports you want. And that can be, for example, this kind of a high crash location list. It could even be a layout. It can be just a diagram. It can be whatever you want, whatever reports are available in your system, anything you can create, will be the first page. And all you'll have is a list of reports. You'll choose a report, you'll say next, and then it'll ask you for the data that you want. It'll ask you for an intersection versus all data, etc. And we'll include a list of all the available filters. That's something that we're doing is we're making something called filter groups, so you no longer have to combine multiple filters manually into one. You'll just pick, I want the filter that says injuries, and I want the filter that says side swipes, and I want the filter that says at night. And you just check the 3 of those, and you say next, and you're done. Your report gets created. In that model, in that view, you won't even see this tree. You'll have the option to push it back into the tree and keep using it, but if you just want to work on one screen and this looks a little bit complex to you, you'll be able to just work on one screen, answer those 2 pages of information, and you'll have your report. That's something we're working on. I believe yesterday I said we'll probably have that by the end of the month, this month. And that's what I'm actively working on at this very moment. Because one of the great benefits of the program is once you build the report, it's really quite easy to get to. The trick of it is making the initial report, figuring out the steps you have to take to get to it. Once you have it, this button right down here is what an administrator can use to set up templates that everybody can just use over and over so that you don't have to spend the time doing all the steps that you see me doing to customize these. You build what you like as it's customized, and then you save it. And then you can just retrieve it anytime you want for any data set. There, that was a little bit of a plug at the end of a training. All right, other questions? Thank you all for coming today, finishing up 14 minutes early. Hopefully we'll see you next month when we do these again. Again, contact us if you'd like us to work with you on anything specific, and I'll work on getting the recordings posted. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, and goodbye.